We talk about it often of, we're behind the times on a lot of things, but not these people. They're ahead of the curve, and they're trying to push the envelope on processes and how we treat people and all the things that construction desperately needs. Man, the industry's lucky to have people like them.
Every single individual has a story to tell, and they're great stories that need to be heard.
I want every listener to know they have the ability to change the world.
Welcome to the 1720 Podcast.
What's up, Mount Movers? Welcome back to the 1720 Podcast. Last year, we had this pretty awesome opportunity to jump onto Build Your Life Resume Radio. This is Jessie Itzler's radio station. And they reached out to us, and we were able to do a Sunday morning slot from 9 to 10. So it was live on radio, not like the podcast. And quickly, we're like, man, we got to get our best friends involved. So really quickly, after joining the BYLR network, we had Daniel Harris, Preston Pressley, Matt Fisher, and David Fultz join us. They're our boys. We know they're great leaders. They'd have something to share. But most importantly, we just wanted to bring them along for this cool ride. So today we thought that we would play through some of those segments because, I don't know, Stewie, I don't think they were heard much by the masses. That was like Texas church hour that our live radio slot was on. So,
well, right. And part of it was, I'm not sure how many people heard them, but the other part is, and I don't know how much you do this, but the other part is I go back and listen to these 4 clips probably more than anything we've done, especially when I'll highlight it when we get to it. But there's especially one in here that we talk about at the office all the time. And so I just thought, this is a great opportunity not to like reuse our material, but to like reintroduce people to some things that we had done before that maybe didn't get all the airplay because of where we were doing it,
I have a feeling the one is the one where you just did not allow me to talk, and you like put your finger over my mouth and hushed me a couple times. And so contrary to popular belief, I am actually in the room for that segment.
It may be. I don't actually remember which one it was that I did that. But it probably is because I got super into it when we were recording it. Maybe why I love it so much. But I do remember doing that to you at one time. I think you said something about it. We'll see, because when we play these clips back, like I've heard them recently, but I haven't listened to them all the way through. So I think at the end of that one, you actually say like, "Hey, I've said nothing. Goodbye."
Yeah, it's all good. I don't need to say anything, but I think this is going to be an awesome mashup for a lot of those that listen to the podcast but didn't catch these radio segments. Our friends brought it.
All right, so we're just going to drop those in here, listen through them, and then we'll pick up on the backside of dropping in some old media from BYLR here and chat through them. So I'm going to give you dealer's choice. What do you want? We can go Preston Pressley, Matt Fisher, Dave Fultz, D. Harris. What do you want? Dealer's choice.
Love the order.
Take it like it is. Here we go. All right,
Yep.
So next up right here is Preston Pressley.
We're honored to have our good friend Preston Pressley join us for a few minutes. He's somebody that we look up to with building relationships and business development. We know he has a good word for us today.
Preston, go, man. What you got?
You stole my thunder, man. You said relationships.
Well, we can talk about it anyway.
Okay, well, that's what we're here to talk about. Real quick, power of relationships. So this is something that has been a big focus since I've gotten out in the industry, and something that I just wanted to share some words of wisdom on, or lessons learned on. And, for those of y'all that are listening, regardless of your title, regardless of your career path, regardless of your industry, we all have the power to reach out and connect and know people. That does not have to be limited to what you're doing, where you are. Just take advantage of being around other folks and getting to know them, and thinking about how I wanted to spend, the power of relationships and how it's affected me coming in today. I was thinking of a 401k plan for a company and a match program. So 401k, you've got to put some money in order to get that company to come back at you with a match. And so when we're thinking about relationships, it takes time. Time is that investment to reach out to folks. Make sure you're calling them, interacting with them, emailing them. And, in the case of a 401k plan, when you do that, that match will come back to you. You get something in return. And so when you're spending time and putting the effort into making sure that you're being intentional about building relationships, it's amazing to see how that can come back around. It's amazing to see how it can benefit you personally and professionally in your career. So many different ways. It's just so fascinating to see people that you've met or talked to years and years ago who may have fallen off that line come back around and become a part of your life. So huge takeaway for me to just continually to invest in people, invest the time, and then the hardest part, for me at least, is to be intentional about reconnecting and making sure you're staying plugged in and in front of other folks.
Yeah, I mean, I think having great relationship with folks is something that's easy to say, but sometimes it's hard to do because you don't know what to do, you don't know what to say, you don't know where to jump in, you don't know what are some tips on, I mean, having those relationships clutch. What are some of your tips on creating or cultivating them from nothing?
We have 2 ears and 1 mouth. God created us that way. Ask questions. I think that is the best way to get to know people. I know as humans, it's always our comfort level to jump in and engage in conversations about ourselves. Really be intentional about trying to limit that and ask good questions. Questions that don't lead to one-word answers, questions that don't lead to yeses or nos or maybes. Ask questions, and it's amazing. Once you find that personal connection with somebody, and we all have a connection with somebody, sometimes it just takes meeting a time or two to find out what that is. Right. But once we do that, you can find that you can really do that by just engaging in some good questions and being passionate about truly getting to know somebody.
And it's really catapulted your career leaning into this wisdom. And you were sharing with us off air that you've done some significant trips with some customers, with some clients, with some friends, and all that blends together. You want to shine some light on that a little bit?
Yeah. In fact, I upped the ante on it a few weeks ago. We went to Alaska with some friends and colleagues in the industry, and, we were without phones, without service. We had a sat phone in case something went awry, but for 4 nights, 5 days, the sun was up from 7 a.m. until midnight. And you want to talk about intentional time with a group of guys. That really opened my eyes to not being distracted while building a relationship. And so I had a lot of great takeaways with that. We get in the habit of checking our watch as soon as our phone buzzes. Even if we don't want to be rude and answer it, we're still probably going to look and see who's calling, right? Those distractions didn't apply when we went on this hunting trip. And so some really good takeaways of just getting to know folks on a different level, very intentionally without distractions, and something that I want to definitely build on, having experienced that a few weeks ago.
Yeah, so this hunting trip was in ADAC, is that correct?
ADAC.
In Alaska?
That's right.
Yeah, and so Preston is previously on the podcast, one of their first handful of guests, talked about that trip you had the first time you went. He's talking about the second time he went. But I remember from when he was on the first time, just some really cool stories there. So if you're interested in hearing more about that, spin back, check out the podcast. Preston was on there. And if you're interested in hearing more about some relationship tips, check it out there too, because that was some big hitters from when he was on the first time.
All right, so there it is, Preston Pressley. Little awkward as we transition out from a segment that we did on the radio. So the editing on that's probably not as clean as I'd like for it to be. But power connections, right? This is Preston Pressley all day long.
That's what I was going to say. He's the perfect person to give this pitch because he's amazing at it. And we actually just came out of our monthly EDP meeting, Executive Development Partners, and that was the title and the theme for that 4-hour meeting was the power connection, how to influence people. And I think about it as I had a conversation with a young girl that was about to graduate college, and she just wanted to know what to do. She was lost in her major and didn't know what field she wanted to get into. And she asked me, what do I need to be doing? And I'm like, honestly, exactly what you're doing right now. Get to know people, because relationships matter and they move the needle more than almost everything else. If you have the drive, determination, and you're networking, you can learn on the widget on the side. Just get to know people and you will find yourself in a good situation.
Yeah, it was interesting to me listening back to that, coming off of, like you mentioned earlier, the EDP stuff, because what we did yesterday, I guess it was a week ago now, but what we did was we worked through some of Dale Carnegie's book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. High level, right? We're burning through it. But as I'm listening to Preston talk back through that segment that he did, dude could have done a master class on that, because he's hitting 7 or 8 of the 10 or 11 points that we even talked about yesterday. So lots of power in there, lots of similarity in the book itself, and very timely on the heels of our EDP stuff yesterday. All right, next up, here we go, Matt Fisher.
We have our good buddy Matt Fisher joining us today, and Matt was our first ever guest on the 1720 podcast. And at one point, we talked about having a structure with outlines and all that, and he looked at me all weird, and he's like, I didn't have an outline. I'm like, oh, man, we got to get him back on someday.
Yeah, welcome, Fish. Sorry for giving you the just crappy way to get started.
Well, I'm glad to be back, and also like I'm the only person that you ever asked at the end of the segment, what's one thing you hate about yourself you wish you could change?
Oh,
and I don't know that you phrased it exactly that way, but then after my segment, you no longer ask that question. So thanks, I appreciate that. That means a lot.
Yeah.
So right off the bat, I want to pivot and put us into a ditch. And
you're playing podcast bingo right now?
If you're playing podcast bingo, this is a twofer. But like everybody that went after me, Preston Pressley, Daniel Harris, David Fultz, all these guys have talked about how awesome their wives are. Well, on my podcast, the only thing I said about my wife is I love aggravating my wife.
You did say that. You did say that.
I need to go back and clarify a year and a half later that, hey, I do love my wife. I do think she's awesome. And if she ever hears this, like, I just want to get that box checked.
Y'all have to skip church on Sunday to be tuning in, though.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, we've had multiple times on the ride home from events or something with my wife, Sadie, and she's like, I just love Holly. I want to hang out with her again. I'm like, good, because I love Matt. That's going to work out really well.
Oh, man. Well, I really appreciate y'all having me on. Following up last week to Preston, really enjoyed his segment. Thought he killed it, but he kind of following up with that, he talked about relationships and what that means to him and how it's helped him in his career. And it's the same thing for me, but a little bit different spin is it's all about who you know, but it's how can you help them?
So good.
And don't go into it looking, how can I help them to get something in return? And I think we work in a group of people, and, if you go out of your way to help people, if you go out of your way to connect people, if you do everything you can to help others, and it's going to come back in return. It's karma. It's God. It's life paying you back. But don't go into it with that mindset. So if you'll go into it with the idea of, hey, what can I do to help others? How can I positively impact this person's life? And it may be financial. It may be through a physical gift. It could be just a connection. All I did was introduce Denise to Kevin, and Elena's gift has completely blown up. And Denise thanked me a lot, and I literally did nothing outside. Hey, here's Kevin. And so again, it's how can you do that to impact others' lives, and that's been very important to me, and I think it's helped me through my career and through my personal life, and it's one thing I get a lot out of. When I was younger, I wanted something in return, but the older I get, the more I get to positively impact people. That's what life's all about for me. And
that's what's so funny about it, because it almost becomes selfish at that point, because that email that you send to a group of people to introduce somebody, there's going to be some value created, and you get that satisfaction for connecting those dots and making that impact exponential. So if you're listening, you're like, well, what would I get out of that? Man, you get the satisfaction of changing the world in your sphere.
It's so rewarding. It's so rewarding. Just it gives you a peace, it's awesome. So highly recommend.
One of the things Matt does really well too is we've talked about gifts or following up or making introductions or whatever the case may be.
I thought you were going to say eating.
I was not going to say that.
No.
Lunch. You do
lunch
really well.
Lunch is kind of one of my,
Although Matt recommended a book, I think might have been on the podcast, it might have been afterwards, that we've circled around the office called Never Eat Alone, which is a game changer too. If you're looking for something to read, check that one out. But what I was going to say is just following up.
Yeah.
Like Matt does a great job of like listening to what you're talking about, identifying something that in a few weeks you'll just check in and say, hey man, how's that thing going? How was the dance recital? Whatever. And so that's another like just really great relationship is just follow up, just check in, just see how people are doing, man. It's not hard, and it doesn't require effort. I mean, it doesn't require money. It just requires a little touch of your time. It's no big deal. So if you want to hear more from Fat Misher, you can just go back to our original podcast. It's the absolute #1 episode. Hear more about what Matt's talking about, what Matt's up to, some books, some really cool thoughts from that.
Awesome, guys. Hey, thank y'all for having me on again. I really appreciate all y'all do. Y'all are moving mountains, changing the world. Appreciate it, guys.
He's an awesome guy, and just kind of speaking to that, like, what can I do for you? That mentality. I'll tell this story here. And I don't know if I've mentioned it on the air or not, but in December, beginning into January, Hayes decides that he wants to start doing a side hustle to being a DJ, right? Super cool. I know I talk about Hayes a lot on the podcast, all the kids, but Hayes a lot on the podcast. And he's got a couple gigs he's doing. It's fun, right? It's fun to watch him like explore his entrepreneurial spirit. Yeah. So number one advocate for Hayes in his like entrepreneurial spirit, Matt Fisher. Every time I see him is like, how's Hayes? I got something for Hayes. What about this? Can he do this for us? What about? And it's just like a testament to like, it's not even me, right? Like this is like next level Fisher putting on a clinic about pouring into other people, because he knows how important my kids are to me, and he knows that what Hayes is doing is exciting to me. And so he's trying to find ways to make connections, plug in, support, help. And that's just like my story. And there are hundreds of them across the Metroplex where people are listening right to me like, oh yeah, Matt did that for me once. Yeah. And so just pouring into other people, just an expert tactician, and not because it's fake or because it's for business. It's for real, because that's how he rolls. Okay, next up, Bish. What a great nickname, by the way. There's two people in my life who have like the dopest nicknames. One of them is this guy named Robert Lindsay, who is a lawyer friend of mine who lives down in Austin. We used to play basketball together back in the day, in like silly lawyer league basketball. Super smart, Harvard grad. He was like the best like trash talker ever, because it was like smart and laser beams, and you're just like, oh gosh, okay. But his nickname is Franchise, which is a pretty dope basketball player nickname. And so we called him Franchise. Top two, because number one is definitely Dave Fultz, and our nickname we've given him, which is the Bishop. All right, so I'll drop in this segment here from the Bish on with us on BYLR, and you'll get appreciation for why we call him that.
We have our buddy, the Bishop, David Fultz, joining us today. We referenced him in the very first episode on BYL Radio, and we're happy to have him as a guest. Thanks for joining us.
What a sweet nickname.
I know. I could never have come up with a better nickname.
Does anybody else call you the Bishop, or is it just us?
It's only you guys.
It'll
makes
spread.
it that much more special. Hey, before I dive in, I need to clarify one thing. Last week on the radio, I'm pretty sure you said Fat Misher.
I think you're right. Yeah, I heard it too, and then we just went with it.
Yeah, power through it.
Yeah.
I think you need to get a survey back from your listeners of how many spit takes did you get out of that one. I hope you got something good.
Lots of tea on the windshield, just can't take it. Yeah, so if you're listening, Matt Fisher, my bad for calling you Fat Misher. In any event, that's not why the Bishop's here, though, man. We're bringing our homies in to just drop some wisdom nuggets on you guys as you're listening on Sunday morning, and so that's where I get the Bishop here. So let me just open the mic for you, man. What do you got for us today?
Yeah, so I want to talk today about how can we make sure that we don't let our secret weapon become our downfall.
Ooh, come on.
And that may seem like this really complicated deal, but it's not. I think so many of us, especially in the high-achieving world, are so focused on, man, I'm just going to grind, I'm going to push, I'm just going to work hard to get my results. And we're able really to kind of grind our way to achievement. And, man, I just think as we look at this frame of I'm going to outwork anybody to get what I need to get, I guess the reality of it is it gives us results. And so we keep feeding into this cycle of I'm just going to outwork everyone. But I think in the reality, if we really do an inventory on our lives, it's going to end up being our downfall. And what I mean by that is as we continue to grind and grind and grind, it points more and more back to me, of what is my motive behind what I'm doing. And I'm sharing this from a place of just a recent realization I've had that as I've been the last few weeks, months into a stressful summer that we're coming out of, man, I unfortunately had to go see the doc because I had a little chest pain going on. And it was a rude awakening for me around, man, what am I using to drive and to motivate me? And the realization that as I continue to grind and outwork in order to get results, it's good for a while, but it's not going to last.
Yeah, you need a minute, and this is me just speaking to me, right, because y'all know my story, but you need a minute to rest and relax and recover, because if you just grind all the time, you will grind yourself completely out.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's crazy to me is I can, in the midst of that, convince myself that the reason why I'm doing it is far different than what it actually is.
Say something more on that. What do you mean?
So in the moment, I can really take this mindset to say, hey, my desire is to serve other people, or my desire is to honor God. And in reality, what I'm doing is trying to do it so I don't need God. And this has been part of my story and part of the reflection I've been going through to say, man, there's some deep-seated wiring in me to try and be good enough, to strive on my own, to not need God because I can do it on my own. And when we get our motives, our deep, heartfelt motives in the wrong place, it's that very small kind of twist that direction that puts us down on the slippery slope where we make it all about us again.
I keep going step backwards and backwards from success, right? Like, what is success if what you're losing is your family, your health, your stress, your relationship with God? Do you even have the correct definition of what success is when you're grinding for success? You're like, wait a minute, success at what cost? And so I'm just feeling some gut punches right now where every time you think of the word success, you're like work, job, promotion, money. And it's like family, God, faith, serving others. Like, flip the script on what success means in your life.
I mean, I think about it a lot. It's a little morbid, but I think about it a lot in terms of my funeral. Like, what are they going to say when I'm in a casket at the front of the church? What are they going to say? What do I want them to say? And I can promise you what I don't want them to say is, he was a great fill in the blank of your job. Like, that's not what I want them to say. And I oftentimes lose track of that, my own self. Like, I'm guilty of it. I'm guilty of doing the work thing and just grinding it out. But what I want them to say is not, he was a great blank. And I think it's a pretty good framework to think about, like, through the week. Is like, what do you want them to say, man? Because the day will come that you'll be laid in a casket and you'll have to, like, think about what that day needs to look like and govern yourself accordingly now to make sure you get there when the day comes.
Absolutely. And I think our bent as folks that are trying to achieve results is we focus so much on execution. And that's why I struggle with this is I want a behavior to take me down the right path. Mm-hmm. When in reality, it's I got to flip a mindset that's then going to change my behavior. And so for me, it's how do I refocus on the reality of God's rescue story? Mm-hmm. I can't rescue myself. That I, in my brokenness, and no matter how hard I try, can never be good enough. I can't rescue myself from that. I'm going to try harder and harder and harder and dig in. And the more I do, I realize, man, this isn't getting me what I want. But in reality of remembering his kindness and the way that he moves towards us, the fact that he moved from heaven to come to earth to pursue us. And there's this beautiful story in the Gospels that Jesus goes away to the mountain to go be with his disciples. And it's just this wonderful picture of, for us, we think so much of, man, how can I climb that mountain? Especially even just the view of the Mountain Movers logo in 1720. In my mind, I always go towards, man, I'm gonna climb that mountain. I'm gonna storm that hill. And in the story, Jesus specifically leaves the top of the mountain to go heal a leper who's outcast from society, dead in his brokenness, and just this physical ailment he's dealing with. And the picture of that for me is so profound of it has nothing to do with my ability to climb the mountain, to go be with him. It's about everything he's done to come down the mountain, to heal me with where I am, rescue me out of that, not operate from this place of trying to get an outcome or for something.
That's why we call him the Bishop, Stewie.
Dude, little good word on a Sunday morning. Thanks for your help, man. I really appreciate you joining us. So we've been doing this with guys who have been on the podcast previously, but if you want to hear more from the Bishop, you can flip back through the 1720 catalog. One of the top, 5 or 10 episodes, you'll find David Fultz and a more good word from him. So thanks for hanging out with us on a Sunday, man.
Love you guys. Keep moving mountains.
Another shining example of why we call David Fultz the Bishop, right?
Yeah, man. Like, he just takes stuff that we're all working on every day. Our listeners, us, our small group, all the mountain movers, right? Of just the grind. Like, we just sort of pride ourselves on the grind. And he does a great job in the middle of that of saying, okay, I'm going to tell you a story about the gospel and how you can never grind your way through that. Like, the gospel is there, and it's redemptive and like grace-bearing properties that you can't grind into. And he does like just a masterful way of just like telling a story, locking us in, and then teaching us about Jesus. And it's not just that one time we happen to snag it from him. Like, this is Fultz always.
Full-time Fultz. That's what I was going to say. Like, this isn't a light switch when we go on air that he has something preloaded, pre-baked for the discussion. That's just him. And
go ahead.
Well, I was gonna squirrel, so you keep going.
Oh, I don't know where I was going, so squirrel.
This segment also produced by a landslide our funniest outtake.
Oh, right. I totally forgot about that.
And I know he's laughing out loud right now and also getting super nervous as he's listening that we're going to play it, which we won't. And it's not.
Oh, I was going to say we will.
No, we don't want to do that.
I have the outtake. I have the outtake.
It's a classic.
Yeah. It's like, well, now everybody's going to wonder what it is. Can we describe it, or do we have to play it?
We'll just make it the opening clip of the episode.
Oh, Fultz will turn in, and then it's just like, turn around and go home. You're like, well, you can't go to the office now.
Like that GIF, SpongeBob GIF. I'm going to head out.
Yeah. Yeah, I just, for those curious listeners out there, he didn't say anything funny. It's just like a noise happened in the background, and you're like, what just happened? Yes. But anyway, it was... Yeah.
I know Fisher's laughing out loud right now because he was in the room for it.
Yeah. Fultz, we won't play it, but just know we have it. It is definitely one of the funniest outtakes. And then we couldn't get back on. Somehow we couldn't get back on because you just laughed and laughed and laughed. There's been a few of those moments over the last 80 so episodes just where you're like, stop it down, turn the recording off. We will never recover from this.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. All right. Let's spin us over here to the last and the one I come back to the most, which is our recording with Uncle Daniel, as we sometimes call him, Mr. Harris. He talks a lot about. Well, we'll just play it here. The clip from Daniel from. We actually played this one back in August of 2021 on BYLR. Here it is.
We're just excited to bring some of our closest friends onto the show because we know how much wisdom they have and how amped up you could get from listening to them. And we have another great friend join us today, Daniel Harris. Thanks for joining us, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. Last couple of weeks have been great watching Fat Matt deliver.
No, I said that on accident.
Yeah, great work, Stewart. Great work. The bishop dropping wisdom bombs and Preston. And those guys delivering. So super awesome. Guarantee you not as much wisdom today, but we'll work on it.
Man, I know that's false. But Daniel's on to just tell us a different perspective, something new, something you're wrestling with. I don't know what's on your phone, but you're about to give it to us. What is it?
Yeah, here it is. So I was thinking about this from a business standpoint, coming in today, but I also just now was thinking about this from a parent standpoint. As Off Radio, we've been talking about kids and kids aging and trying to lead them through that. So I want to look at that from a couple of different aspects of that. But I think a lot of times in life, we as we're shepherding teammates, as we're shepherding children, as we're shepherding those people, we try to eliminate risk from, their day-to-day interactions and what they do. A lot of that is trying to shield them from having to make decisions that we think they may not be able to make or that they may not be ready to make yet. So anyway, want to focus around that and how imperative I think it is for us to have folks make decisions and take risks and own the decision-making process so that they can grow, whether that's employees, whether that's us with kids that are teenagers, that are almost adults, and how we walk through that. So, I rip everything off. So I read a good book by Jim Collins a long time ago, talked about Bill Gore, the guy who made Gore-Tex, and the risk assessment tool he used inside his company. That has been known after that as the waterline principle. Super simple principle. It basically, your just the imagery here is your business or maybe your family is the boat. Every decision you make has the opportunity, if it goes poorly, to punch a hole in the side of your boat. So you make a decision, it's above the water line, punches a hole, you're not going to take on water, your boat's not going to sink, you can repair it. Yes, it takes some time to repair it, but you can keep growing and moving on. You get a hole below the water line of your boat. You're going to take on water. You're going to sink. You're hosed.
Yeah.
So in this instance, if we're looking at it from a business standpoint, it's super critical in my mind that people are making those decisions. How do you really identify, well, what is that? I think we can come out with different groups of leaders in our organization at all different levels because everybody's a leader who wants to be. And really go in and identify, hey, look, this is where critical mass is. This is where we can have a monetary impact or a time impact or a reputation impact, whatever impact is critical to your business that could really sink the ship. So as we identify with our fellow teammates, the leaders in our businesses or our kids, hey, this is where the water line is. If you have a decision that you're going to make and that you've been put in charge of making and it's below the waterline, it has that impact threshold that there is, you need to come talk to the captain. That captain may be the owner, may be the most, vested decision maker or interested party in that portion of the business or in the family. If that's not below the waterline, man, make a decision. Tell me how it went. If it didn't go well, ask for help on fixing the hole, but let's keep going. And in these instances, people have the opportunity to really grow, because if you're not making a decision, then you're just doing what somebody else told you to do. Never really have the opportunity to lead.
Two things. First, if you're playing podcast bingo, by the way, you just got an X because I said two things. But one is like, man, the dudes we run with always say something that like challenges me, right? And this is the second thing is the actual challenge, because I've been wrestling through this phase of like, as I try to grow, I still try to micromanage everything, right? So I'm wrestling it all back in because I want to make sure, to maintain the analogy, I want to make sure there are no holes in the boat. There cannot be a hole in the boat. A hole in the boat is indicative of my inability to lead. A hole in the boat indicates that the boat is not sound. There shall be no holes in the boat. Well, but I'm just stealing everyone's ability to lead. I'm holding people down by doing that.
Man, the problem there, Stewart, in my mind, is if you want to be the guy that's going to ensure that there's no holes in the boat at all, you're going to be the captain of a really small boat.
Tiny the boat will never grow.
Oh, gosh, so good.
That's not just you, Stewie.
No,
that's anybody.
That's
right?
the whole thing. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I've said this at the office a few times, but like I have to get away from the details so that we can grow. That's it, right? I got to stop worrying about if there's tiny holes in the boat above the waterline.
That's absolutely right. And I think about that. I talk to you guys a lot about my daughter. She is. I wish I was half as smart as she was as a 10-year-old. Hell, I wish I was half as smart as she is at 10 as I am at 38. But that kid, she makes decisions. She does things. Some of them, she may be a little bit below the waterline, but she just rolls with it. She doesn't even advise us. It's not even like I'm going to tell you about it. She just goes. And man, that's such a trait that, I admire. And I think about and just, fast forward 28 years from now and man, she'd be the president of Mars or something.
A good point to take there too, though, because you have to evaluate where the waterline is.
Absolutely.
And that means something different for your business or that business or this organization or that organization or your family. You have to identify where it is, because if you don't know where it is, you don't know what's above it or below it, right? And so I'm thinking about the kids, right? Have 3 kids. If you're playing podcast bingo, there's another X. But whether or not you wear
bingo,
whether or not you wear like Hayes rolled out today with a black shirt and navy shorts on above the waterline, like it doesn't matter, right? You'll figure out whether or not that matches. But who you're dating or whether or not you should be dating or what you're doing in that process of dating below the waterline, like we've got to make sure there's not a hole in the boat there, right? You have to find where the line is.
Absolutely, and that's the hard part. As folks, as the captain of the ship, and you're pushing on your journey wherever you're headed, man, having a hole in the boat wherever it is costs time and it costs money, and your boat's not shiny and new because you got a hole patched in it. But at the end of the day, if you want the boat to grow, if you want the boat to run as efficiently as it can, you want the boat to get where it's going and fulfill its intended purpose, then you got to let the different people that are in charge of different parts of the boat and aspects of the boat make decisions. And if that means that there's a hole here and there every now and again, that's what it means. The other thing I think is super critical is just because a decision is below the waterline in no way recuses the leaders in your team from not coming prepared with a plan and an idea and what they want to do. They just have to get approval.
Yeah, right.
They got to come to the captain and say, Captain, this is what's going on. This is what I want to do. Are you good with it?
Right. Is that going to put a hole in the boat?
Right. And if it does, are you on board?
Well, to true seaman form, if you're the captain, you are on board.
Amen.
There you go.
Amen.
Well, man, I appreciate you hanging out with us. Just love chatting with you. And also, if you want to hear more from Daniel, as we've been doing for the last few weeks, rewind on the podcast list to somewhere in the teens. There's hour and a half with Daniel. Would love to
and listen to anyone else's.
No, go back and listen to Daniel. It's a great one. So thanks for hanging out with us, man.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
All right, so that's it, right? I go back to this all the time. We've adopted this vernacular at the office. Where's the water line? Is this above or below? And it's challenging, right? Like you heard me in there saying like I want to make sure the boat has no holes in it. Like that's one of the things that like I hear myself saying all the time, and then I hear Daniel saying like, cool story. if you want to have a tiny boat. And I just wrestle with that. I think about that. I process through that. We talk about that at the office all the time. And every once in a while I'll go back. I'll send this clip to people. It's been one of the most powerful things for me. Not to like suggest other things aren't, but man, this just really resonates with me.
Yeah, and you're going to be the captain of a very small boat. I know that one was a super gut punch for you and really opened your eyes. And the other thing is, like, you're limiting the empowerment and creating careers for other people. Like, you could be stunting their growth, and they're craving it, and that's the last thing we want to do, especially with high achievers.
Right, and when you say, look, we're going to have a people-first culture, but it has to all run through me. No, you have a me-first culture, bro. Like, don't fool yourself.
Me monster.
Yes. And so there's been 2021, a lot of conversation, but especially in 22, like, these are the 5 things that are below the waterline that I'm going to focus on. Everything else is above. It's not in my top 5. You're empowered to go do it. And if it's not right, cool, come back. We'll talk about it. No big deal. And it's been something like just helps get emails out of my inbox, helps get frustration off of my desk, helps get ideas into other people's laps. It's been a game changer for us, for me, for our teams at the firm. So kudos to Uncle Daniel for that one.
There's a couple things I reflect on. Number one, just how lucky we are that this is our inner circle of people that we not just work in the construction industry in, but we do life with. And they also are representative of where our industry is going. You know, we talk about it often of, you know, we're behind the times on a lot of things, but not these people. They're ahead of the curve, and they're trying to push the envelope on processes and how we treat people and all the things that construction desperately needs. Man, the industry's lucky to have people like them.
Yeah, for sure. We talked a little bit about EDP yesterday, about this, what I foresee is like a realignment of the entities, the outfits, the companies that do people right, that do processes right, that are aligning themselves with value propositions correctly, and they're all going to want to do business together. And the others are all going to go in a separate channel, and owners are going to determine who they want to do business with. And it's just this, like, I feel like a shift in culture, an opportunity to gain momentum around this idea, and we just happen to be sort of not on the cutting edge, because hanging out with people and people first is not new. But we happen to be running in groups that are changing our industry in that regard.
100%.
Yeah. So give us, all right. So that's, I'll put a bow on that, and then we'll look to next week. But that is some of our homies and some of our segments from a really cool thing that shows up on a resume forever, which was we were DJs. We were hosts on a radio show for a season, and that was really fun. But those are segments from back in August of 2021 that we wanted to share with you guys, just in case you hadn't heard them. Because of how cool they were and how powerful they are to us. And so we'll close that down, but give us a preview for next week, Kev.
Next week we'll have Javier Huerta. He's on the Texo board. He's one of the co-founders of Carco Painting. Just an awesome dude. I can't wait to hear more about his story. Should be great. He's another one of those mountain movers in our industry.
There you go. So thanks for listening, and we'll catch up with you guys next week. In the meantime, y'all go out there and move some mountains.